right, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to invite you to this lovely event tonight. And in a second, I'm going to pass it over to Moses, who's going to be leading us tonight. I am not going to go over the guidelines tonight. You can find them on awkwardlyzen.com underneath the About section. So if you are not familiar with them, please do that. Main things are be kind, don't be rude, and let's just follow the rules for tonight, which are if you have a question, please put it over in the chat as that question comes up. We're going to give Moses a chance to kind of go through and answer those questions as he goes along, and then periodically he'll be asking me if there's any questions, and I'll share the ones. We have limited amount of time tonight, so we'll get to as much as we possibly can, but we want to do that. I will say, and Moses is going to talk about it here in a minute, he's got another event coming up on the 21st of December, which I'm super excited about as well. That one is a premiere event. So we always ask our partners if they're willing to share for free in these amazing free events that we do. And then we also offer the ability to do premiere events. And I want to make sure everyone understands when you pay for a ticket at a premiere event for Awkwardly Zen, you're not only supporting the amazing partners that we have, but you're also supporting Awkwardly Zen because a portion of those sales goes back to us. So it's one of the ways that we keep our digital doors open to pay for all of our needs and all of that. So just keep that in mind when you see those paid events. We do over 30 free events every month, so we got you covered, friends. But those paid events really do help us all out and support our amazing partners who give so much of their time and energy back to the community. So, with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Moses and his lovely puppy, Milo, and take it away, my friend.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be joining you today to recap the astrology of 2025. First of all, big thank you to Awkwardly Zen. I am based in Denver, Colorado, so I've had the chance to go to a few of their in-person meetings. Ari and team have been nothing but supportive and amazing. And if it's your first time in an Awkwardly Zen event tonight, I would absolutely encourage you to check them out more. It has been such a safe space for me to grow and expand my practice. So big thank you, Ari. And for tonight, we're going to be getting into some of the most dominant themes that showed up in 2025. And the biggest reason we are going to be looking at that this year is because these themes are going to show up again in 2026. So before we get into that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Moses. I am a former corporate leader, a former DEI consultant, and a former youth pastor turned hippie astrologer. And I'm loving every second of it. Live, like I said, here in Denver, Colorado, with my husband and a slew of animals. He can't stop me from getting more. Just got the new puppy 4 days ago, plus two birds, plus another German Shepherd. Just part of the gig. But another thing that I'd really like to say is when it comes to my astrological practice, we are going to be dirty opportunists, which means that we are going to use everything to our advantage when possible and if possible. And I am a firm believer that every single transit has its advantages and its disadvantages. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. All right, sharing screen. So, what is the big idea of astrology? Just a real quick intro to some of the base philosophy behind an astrological practice. The idea is as above, so below, as below, so above. And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But the way that I like to phrase it is that the collective and the individual are mirrors of each other. So we have a collective urge or longing that is unlocked by astrology whenever there is a transit, whenever a planet enters a sign. Those collective longings influence our individual choices, and in return, our individual choices impact and change the collective. We do not practice astrology in a fatalistic way, at least I don't. And what that means is that we have free will. So I like to think of it kind of like whenever a astrological event happens, we have an opportunity to go to path A or path B, or sometimes there's 20 paths that we can go. But wherever we go is ultimately our choice. So it comes at our advantage to know what our choices might be once they're coming down the road, especially as 2026 comes around the corner. Now, the other part is astrology is a complex study. Planets impact individuals, and individuals impact the collective. So it is a little bit trickier than saying Venus is in Taurus, so everyone's going to get rich. Venus in Taurus can absolutely give you some moments or opportunities to have financial gain. But again, since we're operating with free will and that Venus is impacting everyone differently based on their chart, you've got a lot of reconciliation to do. So, anytime we're doing astrology based on the collective, it is going to be a lot of blanket statements. And our job in astrology, as astrologers, intuitives, and even data nerds, is to not assume how the astrology is going to show up. Astrology is called a practice for a reason, because if you are only relying on textbooks for your mode of interpretation, but not actually diving into real life events or big news moments, then you're missing the practice part of the astrology. Sometimes your interpretations of planetary influence will change based on what actually went down. So a lot of times people are interested more in future casting with astrology. For my practice, I seem to find it more helpful to look back at what has happened and how we can follow those patterns. Makes sense? Cool. All right, let's get into it. So, few astro beliefs. I've gone over a few of these already, but just to be clear, your attitude does not always shape reality, but your perception will always impact your future. Sometimes we can't control what happens to us, but the way we perceive it influences the memories that we're carrying and it influences the actions that we're going to take. Sometimes our deepest held beliefs can also be our biggest blind spots, which means if I feel passionate about this thing, I guarantee you there's someone equally passionate about the opposite thing. And in astrology, we believe that all archetypes are divine. There is a time, place, and purpose for everything. So all is welcome. And yeah, that's how it goes. Some transits are intense, some can absolutely manifest negatively, but all transits, like I said, can be leveraged strategically. Dirty opportunist people, that is the key word. Each transit has negative and positive potentials. Some of those potentials will show up naturally for you. We get Pluto square Mars, and it's this big work moment where we get into a conflict with our boss. That doesn't mean that's the only thing Pluto square Mars is trying to do. That same energy could also be empowering you to rise to the occasion, to handle conflict in new ways, or to even start a different endeavor. All of these things are available to us. Some of them are going to show up naturally. It's up to us to grab the string and run with it for the other potentials. And then lastly, no amount of astrology can take the place of your intuition, heart, or gut. Your intuition is sacred. So that means no matter what an astrologer tells you, no matter what any spiritual person tells you, I guarantee you, you want to follow and learn to listen to that thing that's inside of you. As a pastor's kid, I grew up with the saying, you'll know when you're nowhere. And let me tell you, my knower has rarely done me wrong. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. So, we're following the patterns of 2025, getting an idea of how that energy showed up, and we are going to allow actual events to inform our astrological perspective. And with that being said, we're going to start right here with Neptune. Neptune was a dominant influence in the astrology of 2025, and it was also one of the earlier influences, or earlier major influences we had in the year. Before we get into what Neptune did, let's talk a little bit about the archetype. So, the best way I could summarize what Neptune tries to do is it tries to connect us to the higher vibration of love and connection. So in astrology, when you're first learning about Neptune, you'll learn very quick. A lot of astrologers, especially in the 70s and 80s, tied it to escapism, drug use, alcohol use, really tough, difficult things that often lead towards a pathway of isolation. What we're coming to an understanding of with Neptune, at least in a modern spiritual context, is that Neptune wants us to feel connected. It wants us to feel like we have a sense of purpose, and it wants us to feel like we're plugged into love, meaning not just romantic love, but community love. Do we feel like we belong? So there's negative and positive vibrations of that. Some of the negative, you get fogginess, you get escapism, you can get things like disorientation or overly idealistic impulses. But overall, what you want to ask yourself whenever you're dealing with Neptune is this inspiration or illusion? Am I transcending or am I escaping? Is this faith or am I just delusional? And a lot of the times with Neptune, speaking from my own experience, it's been delusion. But at the same time, sometimes delusion is exactly what you need. So for 14 years, Neptune was in Pisces. Neptune is considered the modern ruler of Pisces. I personally use traditional rulerships, but part of the reason Neptune and Pisces seem to get along very well is because they sort of both have that theme of connection, longing, love, and even dreams and visions, creativity. All of those things are kind of parallel between Neptune and Pisces. But for the 14 years, starting in 2011, we start seeing an awareness and a expanded sense of what we call post-truth, which literally means we see things like objective facts are less influential than appeals to emotion and personal belief, as Oxford decided to say in 2016 when it named post-truth the word of the year. We also saw things like the start of the opioid overdose epidemic right at 2011 as Neptune entered Pisces. By 2021, it claimed over 500,000 American lives. I do not have the data for international. We see things like meditation apps like Headspace and Calm coming into the picture, same sex getting legalized, same sex marriage getting legalized. And even more recently, we have things like Meta deciding that it's done deciding what's true. So this idea of post-truth with Neptune and Pisces is very prominent. But it also brought a lot of really cool things like rise of spirituality over religion. We saw a rise of therapy language, spiritual language, and people really getting in touch with their feelings and intuition and their emotions as well. So, like I said, there are some good things, there are some complicated things. All of them are related to Neptune. 2025, Neptune went somewhere that it hadn't been since 1875, where it decided to enter Aries. Um, we're going to summarize this page quickly, but last time Neptune was in Aries was 1861 to 1875. That Neptune in Aries period brought about the Civil War, which started at the same year that Neptune entered Aries. It brought forth national unification movements like Italy unifying same year as Neptune enters Aries. Then later on, we have Germany unifying in 1871. We have the rapid modernization of Japan, the Transcontinental Railroad, the start of the Second Industrial Revolution, some really big, impressive moments when Neptune enters Aries. I want you to think of Aries as a trailblazer kind of energy. So when something enters into Aries, there is an urge and an impulse to start. Do we have any questions so far, Ari? How we doing?
Nope, we look good. Oh, wait, no, somebody did send me a message. What is the traditional archetype of Pisces?
Traditional ruler of Pisces is going to be Jupiter.
Okay.
And I love working with Jupiter, and I can definitely like see from client work that Jupiter has heavy influence whenever it is activated in Pisces. So definitely recommend check out both. See how Neptune influences you if you have heavy Pisces placements, or if you have heavy Jupiter placements or a strong Jupiter, you would definitely want to see how it impacts Pisces.
Beautiful. That was the only question that came through. But I do want to say one thing that I should have said at the beginning, which is as political things come up tonight, please understand that we are not encouraging any sort of political debate. You do you, you take care of yourself. And we have no expectation that anyone believes a certain thing. However, Moses has the floor tonight. So if he chooses to share any of his own personal beliefs, that's for him. Okay. We do have a question about, will this presentation be available for download?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be sharing this Notion portal at the end of class, and then it will be available through Awkwardly Zen's YouTube as well.
Okay, and then Maz, we're gonna let you unmute and ask your question real quick. Maz, you there? Uh-oh. Maz, we can't hear you. So if you want to pop that into chat, then we'll pull in the question in the next one.
Perfect.
All
All
right.
right. We'll go ahead and keep on moving along. So, Neptune and Aries, lots of big influential things. And the thing is, like Aries saying, our goal is to really be an observer of the events, not putting our own beliefs or bias into the events. So thank you for that political call out because it is definitely important that, anytime astrology comes up, it is almost unavoidable to have confirmation bias. It is almost unavoidable to look at it through the lens of your own belief system. So, yes, there will be some political things that come up. It is not me condoning them, and it is not me saying they are okay or right, but instead is me just calling what actually happened as it was. So, that being said, big themes of Neptune and Aries the last time around. We saw new identities coming up for the world. We saw dissolving old identities, idealistic crusades, fighting as a sacred act, illusions around independence and ego, and then a rise of art and imagination with the Impressionism art movement gaining traction towards the tail end of Neptune and Aries. Now, the reason why we're bringing this up is because last year, from March 30th to October 12th, Neptune made its first ingress into Aries for the first time in 84 years. And immediately, we saw some news correlations that can be tied to its influence. So, for example, the theme of fighting as a sacred act, we had the No Kings protest. We had 2.5 million people protesting across Israel for a ceasefire. We had anti-corruption protests across Ukraine, and we had a complete overthrowing of the Nepalese government by Gen Z, all within this time frame. We also start seeing those themes of unification coming back up around. Trump announces the America First tariff plan. We have some shedding with Pope Francis dying and Pope Leo getting elected. Neptune rules over spirituality, so that is very fascinating that it corresponded within that transit. We have Anna Wintour stepping down from Vogue, icon legend. I wish I had her bob. And we also had Zoran Mamdani winning the New York City mayor race primary. Now, we also had things like the Charlie Kirk assassination, Greta Thunberg getting seized by the Israeli Navy, the first millennial saint getting canonized. Should have been me. I'm not here to judge. It's okay. And the UK voting age lowered to 16. So, with all of those headlines, our goal is we want to look at that past data of what took place in 2025 and the last time around in the 1800s of what happened and what does this transit seem to reward. And what I found for myself in observing how it impacted my life and the collective, Neptune in Aries seems to reward pioneering a new vision or identity, fighting for something you believe in, creative courage, meaning not being afraid to express yourself in new and creative ways. What we want to really avoid when we have Neptune in Aries is passivity. If Aries is the starter, the goer, the doer, what can happen is Neptune can absolutely fog our vision. It can make us overly idealistic, or it can cause us to think in bigger picture terms and in feelings rather than the facts of the circumstance. But we don't want to use that as an excuse to not act. With Neptune and Aries, we don't necessarily have to know how we're going to get to the big picture. We just start to have to run to the big picture. Um, we also want to avoid clinging to outdated versions of yourself. We want to avoid aggression, being overly aggressive in pursuit of a specific cause. We wouldn't want to disguise that as idealism if our goal isn't rooted in the betterment of humans, right? So we don't want to just push our agenda for the sake of pushing agenda if we're not doing it for something that's bigger than us. Where Neptune is, ego dissolves. So if you are really ego focused during a Neptune transit, you might have a lot of issues reconciling with feelings of isolation. Ego is not a negative or a dirty word by any means, but when Neptune is involved, it requires us to lean into the collective, trust fall into the safety net, and trust that the universe has our back. Now, taking advantage of it from a business perspective, we want to rebrand. We want to reposition. We want to reinvent. We want to imagine a new reality for us, our brands. We also want to lead with inspiration, not just information. So we don't want to just talk people to death. We want to inspire them with what could be. So leaders who have that inspirational mindset and are willing to actively be the first ones to take step into the fog, they're going to be rewarded with something bigger, brighter, and more optimistic. And what I would ask is, what would I pursue if I wasn't afraid of looking foolish? So with Neptune in Aries, we definitely want to start, and we want that start to be rooted in our creativity. So a few questions we've got there. Where did fighting for a dream tip into chaos? What old identities are being shed? And when does idealism become aggression? Now we are 25 minutes in class, and I have gone through one planet. So, Ari, do we have any quick questions?
We do. If someone was an Aries, would they be more aware of these phase and cautious regarding the on the go spirit? Like, should an Aries be a little bit more alert?
What I would say is for anyone who has Aries placements, they might feel these themes come up a little more intensely. So Aries really is about the individual, right? It's not really there to compromise. It's there to go first. So with Neptune, there can be moments where we expand that sense of I have to go first and we think we don't need other people and then trick ourselves into isolation. Or there could be moments where we are exactly the medicine that the collective needs in order to pursue something bigger and greater. So I would say Neptune, not Neptune, people with Aries placements have the advantage. And there, with that advantage, there comes greater risk. That is inherently just how it goes. If you're bound to do something great, when you level up, so does your opportunity to go the wrong way.
Beautiful. All right, I'd say go ahead and hit it and we'll see what we get.
Perfect. So pattern two was Saturn. Saturn also entered Aries in 2025. Saturn is the great restrictor. Saturn is daddy energy. It's going to ask you to do better. It's going to ask you what you did wrong. And it's not going to reward you just for being cute. When Saturn is present, we are asked to build structure, to go for long-term goals, and to commit to our decisions and build success after success. So with Saturn, we want to ask, what can we be accountable for? What have you actually built? And what do you deserve? Not because you're cute, but because you have earned it. Last time Saturn was in Aries was 1996 to 1999. I'm going to skip some of the moments that happened here, but they'll be available in the link towards the end. But the biggest thing that I can say, themes of accountability and scandal really became prominent, the most prominent being the Clinton Lewinsky scandal. The individual pioneering versus bold starts. We had the launch of Google, Netflix, Steve Jobs returning to Apple iMac, and the Wi-Fi standard being created. So really big moments present with Saturn and Aries last time around. So with Saturn and Aries, action-based leadership thrives. Our boundaries get sharp. We want to pioneer, but we kind of have to grit down and go a little bit slower than what we want to do. So it's like we get the idea, we get the creative impulse, and everything in our body says, do it now. And then we're met with restrictive realities. There's the Saturn influence saying, actually, have you built your base yet? Actually, what's the small scale version of this that we can start with? When it went into Aries last year, between May 24th and September 1st, we had federal courts ruling that Trump's tariffs exceeded presidential authority. There's those themes of power limitations. Aries also rules the head, which is a very interesting thing, and you can take that symbolically or literally. So when Saturn is in Aries, you can see the head of something being held more accountable than the body, meaning CEOs, business owners, the people at the top hold the higher level of accountability there. We saw things like South Korea electing their opposition leader as president. We saw the National Guard deployed to Los Angeles during this time. And to be frank, ice raids were a major theme of Saturn and Aries, and something that's interesting to see come up. That does not mean that that's how it's going to manifest for the next year, but we want to look at ways that national identity is being prioritized, whether we like how it's being done or whether we think it's horrendous and non-ethical. I don't blame you if you think that way. Um, we still have to just be mindful that the theme Saturn and Aries lends towards is unification of some kind of way. So we need to be one thing. And there's a lot of debate and discourse that just comes up with that inherently. Ice raids is one of the ways it did last year. We also, again, had Supreme Court rulings
So
all.
this, can I clarify? When you say last year, you mean in 2025, right? In this year?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just want to clarify. Thank you.
I'm already studying the astrology of 2026, so in my head, it's August of next year. But we also had things like Supreme Court really testing where presidential rights should be held, and a kind of restructuring of that in some kind of way. We had the former president of Brazil placed under house arrest with an ankle monitor, more accountability being held. And then we also had some peace deals being signed. 40-year conflict ended between two nations. Pretty awesome. So, what we notice from Saturn and Aries is that it's going to reward decisive, accountable leadership. It's going to reward setting firm boundaries and enforcing them, and it's going to reward doing the hard thing first. What we don't want to do with Saturn and Aries is wait for group consensus. If you are looking for a diplomat, you are looking for Libra, the sister sign. If you are looking for a warrior who's not afraid to chop someone's head off, that's Aries for you. It is act first, action now, think about it later. And there's this sort of like instinctual drive with Aries. So, what we would want to do is we would really want to take advantage of our instinctual drive and really learn how to work with it. When do we move too quickly because we're overly excited or anxious? Those are the things we want to start weeding out. And the last thing I'd say is authority without follow through does not get rewarded with Saturn and Aries. If you are not doing the work, if you are not taking action, you are missing out on some of the blessings and opportunities that Saturn can bring you. So you want to make tough calls. You want to build accountability systems for others and yourself. And you want to make sure that you're really owning your responsibilities. Got a few questions popped up here for journaling, but while these are going, do we have any questions for Saturn and Aries?
I don't think so. We had some questions about the dates, but we got that covered, and I think we're good.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, definitely for society, we want to look back at like how authority really started to shift and think about that critically. You can learn from some of the leadership mistakes that were prominent through 2025 in order to take advantage of them in 2026. So if there were scandals, if there were things going down, if there were moments where leadership got a healthy smack of reality, learn that lesson from them so you don't have to learn it for yourself. The other thing that I would say from this slide is that we really want to understand our boundaries in a new way when we have Saturn in Aries. We have to know what we're accountable for and what we're not accountable for. We can't be afraid of flexing our boundaries, right? Our boundaries are not meant to stay the same size forever. However, we do want to make sure that we are clear and concise with our boundaries. A lot of the times when there is Aries going through a moment or having a difficult time, it is very easy for there to be a retreat or to feel like you're being backed into a corner, even when you're not. So just understand that we really want to make sure that we feel connected. And the more we can learn to communicate through that Saturn and Aries transit, the better we'll be. Cool. Let's keep going. This is going to be our last major planetary energy that we discuss. There will be two honorable mentions because I couldn't not. I had like an entire year of news headlines and I couldn't pick three. Sorry. But Uranus, in 2025, we saw the first glance of Uranus in Gemini, which I gotta tell you, one of the transits that I am the most excited about, and I cannot wait to see what it brings. So you think of Uranus as a mad scientist kind of energy. It has been labeled everything from the innovator to the divorce maker. And the reason why it carries that is because Uranus enters a spot in your chart and it's there to show you what isn't working. So if there are things that are not in alignment in your life under the specific house Uranus enters, you might notice some radical dramatic changes. It's a lightning bolt kind of energy that makes things really unpredictable, sometimes really crazy. But by the end of it, if you roll with it, if you fuck with Uranus, then there are some really great potentials you can get out of it. You'll be at the cutting edge of things, whether that's the emotional cutting edge, the friendship cutting edge, or even the technological cutting edge, with Uranus being the modern ruler of Aquarius. So, pretty cool things there. Uh, Technology innovation is really the biggest thing I would talk about with Uranus. And the reason why is because the last time Uranus was in Gemini, we kind of get the end of World War II. So I'm happy to tell you that if you heard an astrologer saying Uranus in Gemini means that we were going into war, the war technically started with Uranus and Taurus, and we're already past that. So we don't necessarily need to be afraid whenever we talk about things like World War II, or even with Neptune in Aries, the Civil War. History rhymes, it doesn't repeat. So, with that being said, we start seeing Uranus and Gemini bring things like information warfare. Uranus enters Gemini, and suddenly code breaking and the Enigma code get cracked. So that was a really cool moment. We had D-Day, which was the largest coordinated military communication operation in history. We had the Manhattan Project and atomic bombs. And really, the common theme behind the technological innovation of the 1940s was innovation out of necessity. So it wasn't just that we were creating all of these super cool things like computers and radar for consumer use. They were being created in the private sector, in the government sectors, behind the scenes, and we didn't even know how far advanced our military was until we saw it in action. So, with all of that being said, this time around, July 7th to November 7th, we start seeing these immediate shifts in the AI revolution. Everything from anti-Semitic hate speech being promoted from AI, agent mode from ChatGPT being a new thing where it can perform tasks for you. We have GPT-5, and we also have studies saying how AI is misinterpreting half of the data that we have, especially when it comes to the news. Um, Study reveals AI misinterprets news in 50% of responses. We also see things with Uranus and Gemini. With Uranus and Gemini, think of it as the last wave of television media. It was really the first starting place where we had these titans of culture come in. So the Clintons were born with Uranus and Gemini. Jimi Hendrix was born with Uranus and Gemini. Cher was born with Uranus and Gemini. So it's kind of like you start seeing communication being developed in some new and fascinating ways. And immediately there comes a culture with it that's sort of attached to it. So, an interesting thing there is like the people who are already in place, the people who have the connections, have the ability to influence and control the culture that comes with the technological innovation. So, really interesting stuff we see with Uranus and Gemini. But the biggest thing is we want to understand and be clear that the consumer facing product really is not the innovation. That is the aftermath. The real innovation is when you see things like ChatGPT partnering with the US government. I guarantee you their product is better than ours. So there are pieces like that that really come into play when we have Uranus and Gemini, and that's what we want to keep track of. So Uranus and Gemini is going to reward learning fast and adapting faster. It's going to reward experimenting with new communication tools and platforms, and it's really going to value intellectual flexibility. Gemini rules everything from communication to education. It's any place where our own personal bias is not supposed to come into the picture. Our job is to just communicate the thing. So if you think about a news reporter, that news reporter isn't there to give their own personal opinion. They are there to read the teleprompter of what is happening without putting their own thought onto it. And that's kind of what Gemini wants to do. It's not there to judge what's happening. It's there to gather all the information and data and to kind of Sherlock Holmes it, meaning like, I don't know what's going on, but here are all the clues. So rigid thinking is not rewarded with Uranus and Gemini. Um, Ignoring technological shifts until you are forced to catch up will put you at a disadvantage. Hoarding information without sharing it can also put you at a disadvantage. So we are entering this time period where there are a lot of ethics around AI. There are a lot of ethic concerns around new media and emerging platforms. What I can tell you is if you are not savvy with it, if you are not understanding it, and if you are not ahead of the curve, your ability to control how it is driven and what will be done with it gets diminished and lessened. And let's be so honest here. We all know that corporations are not going to be the ones missing out. It is small businesses who are going to be missing out from this. It is the young entrepreneur who is taking their ethical concerns seriously and trying to do the best thing for the collective. And with Uranus and Gemini, we really want to find ways and moments that we can integrate and merge our belief system for what's coming in the future. So we really want to get curious about AI, diversify how you communicate. So if you are on social media for your business or for your brand, you want to look at different ways that you can communicate. All types of communication will be accelerated and rewarded. And we also want to really test our assumptions, especially if there's a chance that they could end up being outdated. So, on to our questions here. We've got a few questions for society. How did information become a weapon this year in 2025? What are the old ways of communicating and who controls the narrative? And for you, what did you learn that changed the way that you saw things? How did you get a new lens, or what was your lightning strike aha moment in your life? It may not have been technological. What I would want you to do is to look at the house Uranus is entering once it goes into Gemini, focus in on that area of life, and see the things that aren't working for you. There might be some question marks or some things where you're not sure if it's working out this way or the other way, and that's okay. But we really want to be clear on what makes us feel empowered, what makes us feel excited, and what makes us feel alive. How are we doing? Do we have any questions coming through?
Not that I can see.
Yes, okay. You guys feel free to ask any questions you have along the way. We have two more sections and we are doneskies. And they are honorable mentions at that. So the first honorable mention that we have is the eclipse period. Eclipses are big deals. Eclipses are not just impactful around the date of the eclipse. Really, we look at 2 weeks before the first eclipse and 2 weeks after the last eclipse within an eclipse season. So, for example, early on this year, we had March 14th, the total lunar eclipse in Virgo, followed by a solar eclipse in Aries. So, for that entire period, I'm going to look at February 28th through April 12th to see how that event impacted me. And it's an interesting thing that we saw come through with some of the headlines. Virgo really did a big one this year. Virgo has been in the public spotlight a lot here recently, specifically through things like healthcare, work, employee concerns. The rise of AI taking the place of employees is also a really big Virgoan thing. And then we also had those themes of Aries coming through with the last eclipse cycle being between Aries and Libra. We're still kind of in some fluctuation. Next year, we're going to see Virgo and Pisces eclipses, but they're going to be partnered with Leo and Aquarius eclipses. So that nodal axis will start to change and the themes change with it. But as of now, this past year, during that eclipse season, we saw Trump vowing to acquire Greenland, which feels like fiction at this point now that we've come this far ahead. I don't even know what to think about this one, but we that's the news at the time. We saw the layoff of over 80,000 employees in the US Department of Human Affairs. We saw the Stand Up for Science protests. Science is a very Virgo-y practice. Gemini and Virgo, I'd say, and Aquarius. We got Mark Carney replacing the former Prime Minister of Canada and getting sworn in. We've got the UN Human Rights Council accusing Israel of genocide. Donatella Versace stepping down from Versace after 28 years. And we also have March 27th, the US government announcing the health department restructure with 33% of the health department laid off. So really, there are totally some of themes around Aries, the head, accountability that I saw, but really most of the headlines leaned really heavy into that Virgo theme. So I would really pay attention over this past year. How did that show up for you? Did it show up in terms of taking care of your body? Did it show up as setting up new systems for yourself? How did you try to hold yourself more accountable? And how did you really focus in on what is tangible, practical, and real? When you are in the element of Earth, as Virgo is, it is about what is physically present. Virgo is the archetype where if they ask, how can I help? And you say, no, I'm good. They're not going to be good with that answer, you guys. I don't know if you know that, but they're just not. You have to give them a thing. Maybe I'm just triggered. I'm a Virgo. We should move on. But so some pretty interesting themes coming through in March from that Virgo Aries moment. Then when we switch to the next eclipse cycle, that was between August 24th to October 5th, with the actual eclipses happening September 7th and the 21st. We still had Virgo present, but this was our first pure experience of a Virgo Pisces eclipse season happening right along that axis. Now, what I want you to think about, if Virgo rules healthcare, Pisces rules things like holistic healthcare. If Virgo rules tangible, practical support, Pisces rules emotional support. So they are sister signs, and they're both going to be healing energies. A Virgo type of healing energy heals in the way that a mechanic fixes a car. It diagnoses parts, it sees what's not working, it pulls it out, and then it puts the part back together. That is a healing energy. Pisces, on the other hand, is kind of like how you choose to heal a heart, which means sometimes diagnosing the issue doesn't even help. When Pisces is involved, you have to consider the fact that sometimes putting words to your feelings, finding solutions to your problems, one, sometimes just can't happen, and two, sometimes doesn't even help us feel better about it. So with Pisces, we see healing in the forms of dance, art, creativity, spirituality. Pisces even has correlations to intimacy and sex in some ways. So we really see that dichotomy between Virgo and Pisces, just between what's practical and what feels right. In the headlines we saw, really, again, health came in full swing. September 4th, we saw Florida eliminate all vaccination mandates. Again, that Pope Leo canonizing the first millennial saint fell within this window as well. We found possible life on Mars. We saw a UN commission declaring that Israel is responsible for genocide in Gaza. We saw that entire debacle about acetaminophen and autism claims. And we also saw, rest in peace, AOL dial-up service was discontinued. We will always remember you and the noises that you made. So some really fascinating moments in Windows that kind of happen between those two eclipse periods. What I would really want you to pay attention to next year, where is Virgo in your chart and where is Aquarius in your chart? Similarly, where is Leo and where is Pisces? You want to look at those by house and sort of determine what showed up for you last time between Virgo and Pisces, what's going on in your chart in Aquarius and Leo, and how do we sort of reconcile with any struggles we might be having in those part of our charts. The really interesting thing about eclipses is they're often disruptive. A lot of the times there's not things that we can do to prepare for them, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're negative. A lot of times, I can tell you this much. If there's an eclipse, I'm launching a product, I'm doing something. That's just the way that I roll. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but it has always served me well, despite the common idea that you want to not manifest on eclipses. I'm calling BS on that one, you guys. That last eclipse was fantastic. So, that being said, really good time to plan some major changes if you're looking for them, or just kind of be prepared to see things shift and change for you. Do we have any questions before we go to the last one?
We just had one about when you mentioned the moon. How about the influences of the three super full moons in a row?
Three super full moons in a row. I am going to be so honest and vulnerable with you guys here. I pay little to no attention to the names of the moons. I really focus on them by planet and sign. The moon can be studied your entire life, and you can still not know everything you need to know about it. In fact, I would even argue that Vedic astrologers have a much better grasp and understanding of the moon than many Western astrologers, because it is that dynamic and nuanced, and there are practices built into the Vedic tradition around it as well. I am not the astrologer for that. What I can say is I liked them. I hope that helps.
Very beautiful. No, I appreciate you being honest with that. That's what we need.
Absolutely. All right. So lastly, Pluto and Aquarius. Look, guys, we're with Pluto and Aquarius until the 2040s, my friends. So this is an energy that once we get like 5 years into it, we're probably not going to hear that much more about it. It kind of goes into the background once it's sort of out of the public zeitgeist, but that doesn't mean it's not doing anything. With Pluto ruling over power dynamics, I absolutely see this show up in personal charts under a transit. If you have a Pluto transit happening in your chart, you're gonna feel it in some kind of way. It is potent, it is impactful, kind of asks us to shed old identities and to find the warrior within ourselves. And it kind of asks us to confront with things that we've kept hidden even from ourselves. Now, during its time in Aquarius, technology, human rights, collective networks, innovation, ideology, and the people come into play. So the collective becomes a little bit more potent and impactful than the individual. Um, Thus, whenever we saw Pluto in Aquarius last time, we had things like the French Revolution, the start of America. I lost the word for that event there, but we had the start of our own nation during Pluto and Aquarius there, and we also had the tail end of the Industrial Revolution taking place with Pluto and Aquarius as well. So lots of big moments happened last time around, but it's been interesting to see how it's been showing up for us over the course of this year. Now, remember, guys, we have multiple transits and things going on all at once. So you might look at some of these events and say, actually, that feels more Uranus and Gemini to me. Or you might say that it feels like a different influence. If you have a different opinion, I fully support you and I agree. That is an important thing to keep because it is absolutely easy to cherry pick your data when you are looking for things to match the astrological energy. We're taking it with a grain of salt, but the largest theme that I saw was who controls information, who controls the flow of information, AI, our networks, and is the power going to institutions or is it going to the masses? We had a lot of things happening that were made aware to the public, but maybe weren't the main headlines. Government deploying AI was one of those things. January 26th, ChatGPT announced that it was going to begin introducing models for government operations. June 5th, we saw Anthropic and Claude AI saying that it was going to make a model for national security. And even in a first, September 12th, we had Albania appoint an AI bot as a minister in their government. So, very, very interesting as a method that they were doing to fight corruption. We also saw a lot of power imbalances when it came to regulating AI. You can absolutely read these headlines yourself. One of the most dominant themes that I saw was the EU being one of the main political forces to say, like, hey, we should maybe have some rules around this, versus other countries competing for dominance around that and seeing those rules and structures as obstacles in their path towards getting ahead of their opponents. Over the course of 2025, through some of those, we saw things like Russia gunning for AI. We saw things like China gunning for AI with over 1,500 large language models that it created by 2025. And we also saw things like the United States really investing and expanding in the ecosystem around AI. So even by the end of the year, the European Union postponed parts of their AI Act due to pressure from tech companies. That's kind of the theme when we get to Pluto and Aquarius is like technology is here whether we like it or not. So who's going to be in charge of it? And who's going to be the dominant power who decides how it's going to be used? So some really provoking questions. Geopolitics came into the picture as well, specifically around AI. Russia deepening its partnership with China. We had Trump reversing some Biden era AI processes. We also had things like India, Australia, and Canada launching a trilateral AI innovation alliance. So new alliances are being formed in the background, and if you think that the AI bubble is going to pop at some time, I'm not saying that can't happen. What I am saying though is it is insane how much it is being used by government without us knowing. Even in this past year, Google revoked a claim where it originally said it wasn't going to use artificial intelligence to help develop weapons. And then it turned around later in the year and said, actually, we're going to do that. So these things are happening in the background, whether we like it or not. And it really comes down to what global superpower is going to be in charge of it at the end. So you can see that headline here, February 5th, Google removed that commitment. We also saw things like a call for a superintelligence ban, the thing after AI. Folks saying like, can we not go higher than this, please? Because how do we control something like that? But overall, that Pluto and Aquarius energy brought a lot of power dynamic questions around who's going to emerge as the global superpower at the end of this fight for technology. And we are gunning towards the end. Ari, do we have any last minute questions?
I think we may have a question right at the very end, so I'd say go ahead and wrap it up, and then we'll open it up for just a moment.
Absolutely. So you can screenshot this, or again, it'll be available. I'll share it at the end of the presentation here. But we have some real things that are happening that we shouldn't be blindsiding ourselves to. Just because we don't want to see change doesn't mean that change isn't coming. So we have to, in one part, really hold our integrity. And we want to make sure that whatever we're deciding to do, it's in alignment with our intuition, what feels right for us, and what feels right for the people we love and the people we care about. And we also want to make sure that we are doing the things that are necessary to give ourselves an advantage and to put ourselves ahead so we can provide for the people we care about, right? So technology is reshaping everything. We want to make sure we are literate in not just AI, but all types of technology that are really expanding. We don't want to be the tail end of that transformation. We want to get ahead of it. Accountability is catching up to people in power. So integrity becomes a competitive advantage. If you have the opportunity for a squeaky clean presentation or a presentation that can show a little bit of the rough edges, I would say show your rough edges. People are going to be so turned off from how easy it is to be perfect with AI. So I definitely think the humanness is really going to show through. I wouldn't encourage using AI to write for you. I would maybe consider using it to enhance what you've already written, but I strongly encourage you. The thing that AI cannot do is create your individual unique thought. Your thoughts are yours. We've got to grow the brain and use our tools as tools and our brain as our brain. And then bold individual action. If you are thinking of branching out, blazing a new trail, you've got Saturn and Neptune in Aries, which can cause some confusion and restriction around that, but it's also very rewarding to go the long run with those two planets. So don't be afraid to get expressive. Don't be afraid to showcase something unique and individual, and don't be afraid of going outside of the box with branding. So bottom line, what I saw in 2025, it rewarded adaptivity, it rewarded authenticity, and it rewarded people who were action oriented. And with that being said, guys, that is the end. What questions you got?
All right. First, while we're waiting for that question to see if it pops up here, do want to ask you to tell everybody about your next event with us, which is 2026, and just kind of give them an overview of what they could expect if they sign up for that event, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So my entire thing is take advantage of it. I could say that till the day I die, but really what it's going to be about is what I call bubbles of time, which means this certain date range really rewards this. This date range seems to reward this. So we're going to be revisiting some of these same themes that we talked about today, but we are going to be talking about them in a future tense in alignment with the astrological energy of that period. So what I would expect, I still haven't written it, so please don't hate me if some of this doesn't end up in it. I would expect for us to cover eclipses. I would expect for us to cover the outer planets energy, and I would expect for us to cover some of the more unique outer planet aspects that are taking place. There's some really cool combinations that we can apply some top-down strategies to, and really how we can take advantage of it is going to be the edge.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And that's over in the chat, friends, or you can find it on your meetup group with Awkwardly Zen. And then, Mads, what was your question there?
Yes, Moses, excellent presentation, very thorough, very articulate. It's you did great. Couple observations I first want to mentioned before asking the questions. One, life has always been on Mars, so just recognize that. And the second one here is the retrogrades and Mercury. I'm surprised like the retrogrades and within Mercury has affected me, and I know others a lot this year, and I'm not too sure if that goes along with the Gemini um in Uranus, but I wonder why maybe you didn't touch on that. And if I could just continue for one thing more, how you started off your presentation as above, as below. When I thought about that, I thought about it brings like the best of us or the worst of us out. And that goes along with all the collaborations that went along this year, whether they were positive and negative with the ice forces or even, um, the collective humanity coming together in a positive note, as just a thought. So, if we could go back to maybe the retrogrades and Mercury, and any thoughts about the yes, tarot cards with the planets?
Ah, yes. I won't have time to get into the tarot cards for this class, but what I can definitely say is next class will be a 2 hour presentation, and that's what really was the limiting factor with some of the decisions that I made. I really went with the highest level themes that had the most potential that I saw repeating. So, for example, like Mercury retrograde won't be in the same signs that it was in 2025. However, the 2026 class will give you the Mercury retrograde windows. It may not go into them in the deepest amount of detail because they are one of the more common retrogrades that we see happen every year. So it's not really distinguishable in a more major sense year to year. But I totally respect the fact, especially with that Gemini comment, people can feel them very intensely. And I definitely saw a lot of activity around them. So I really appreciate that feedback for it and absolutely will be part of the next class.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks for that, Moses. And yes, you covered so much in this hour. So thank you so much for that. Moses, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Oh Hey Moses, and in my link in my bio, I will have my stand store as well, which is where I offer bookings, as well as my 2026 astrology planner that I developed inside of Notion. So if you are looking for all of the astrological data of 2026, that is available for you in a user-friendly format for $25 as a way to really keep track and work with the transits coming into next year. And I will also go ahead and share the link to this presentation for you.
And let me just say, I purchased the planner last week and have started playing with it and going through it. And for those of you who are very hardcore into it, you can get as much information as you want with this planner. So for someone like me who's a little bit more general, it's there and it's beautiful. And then if you want to dig in deep to how every little thing is going to affect you, Moses has you covered. So make sure you grab that. I was shocked it was only $25, Moses. So thank you for making it attainable for people. And the presentation is over in the chat. Make sure you grab that. You can find Moses on Instagram. And thank you all so much for being here. Hopefully, we'll see you on the 21st at Moses's next event.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.